Recorded Books and One Click Digital present Hollow World by Michael J. Sullivan, narrated by Jonathan Davis and directed by John Sood. This book begins with an author's note, narrated by author Michael J. Sullivan.
Hello, I'm Michael J. Sullivan. Welcome to Hollow World. I'm very proud of this very unconventional and likely controversial little tale, which I never meant to write. You see, at any given time, I have 7 or 8 novels stacked up in a queue waiting their turn, and Hollow World wasn't one of them. It began as a donated anchor short in an anthology to spotlight new writers, and once that seed was planted, it just wouldn't stop growing. So after completing the novel I had been working on, I pushed aside the others and moved Hollow World to the top of the list. Not only is the story unconventional, a mix of genres including science fiction, mystery thriller, and even a bit of the fantastical thrown in, but the way in which it's being released is equally outside the mainstream. It began with a rejection, which really wasn't surprising given its hybrid nature. So I turned to Kickstarter, where I was hoping to raise half of the $6,000 to pay for my A-team of publishing professionals. People like Betsy Mitchell, Del Rey's editor-in-chief for over a decade, and Mark Simonetti, who has created amazing artwork for the French editions of My Rare Revelations, as well as covers of Patrick Rothfuss's King Killer Chronicles and the Mexican edition of George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. No one was more shocked than I when instead of the expected $3,000, the project raised more than $30,000. Along the way, I was offered an attractive 5-figure advance for Hollow World. But that publisher wanted all the major rights, print, ebook, and audio. This meant a loss of control and no ability to participate in innovative programs like Amazon's Matchbook or Oyster, which is the new Netflix for books. I also would have no say over who produced the audio version. I couldn't bear losing Recorded Books, who has done such an amazing job with my Rhaenyra stories. So I did what few authors would. I turned it down, kept my ebook rights, sold the audio rights directly to Recorded Books, and the print rights to award-winning Tachyon publications. The reason this is important to you, the reader, is that I have the flexibility to do the things that most publishers either can't or won't do. For instance, I'll provide free ebooks for anyone with the audio or print editions of Hollow World. Just send me an email with a copy of your receipt to michael.sullivan.dc@gmail.com and tell me what format or formats you would like to receive. You'll get them DRM free, so you can read them on any device you wish. Now I'd like to take just a minute to set some expectations about the science in my science fiction. Time travel, as described in this novel, isn't possible. It's important to mention this up front. It's not like I'm saying, don't try this at home. I'm simply clarifying that Hollow World is as much a work of fantasy as it is science fiction. But then again, most science fiction has a dash of fantasy thrown in, that artificial what-if spark that ignites a chain reaction that propels everything forward. In the classic The Time Machine, H.G. Wells has a very high-tech explanation for how his device was able to skip through the years. He states, "Now I want you to clearly understand that this lever being pressed over sends the machine gliding into the future, and this other reverses the motion." That's pretty much the extent of his hard science. Of course, his story, while named The Time Machine, really wasn't so much about the machine or the science behind it, but rather speculations on the future of mankind. So is Hollow World. For my story, I did research into time travel theory and drew inspiration from a handful of sources, most notably Time Travel in Einstein's Universe, The Physical Possibilities of Travel Through Time, by renowned astrophysicist J. Richard Gott. Mr. Gott provided a plausible explanation for how a stationary object could move significantly forward in time by overcoming the g-force restriction of linear travel by moving interdimensionally. This is theoretically possible if you could put yourself in the near center of a black hole while maintaining a defensive shell using electrostatic repulsions of light charges. That's the theory. But as I said, time travel isn't possible. At least not in an urban garage with the materials Ellis Roger uses. I fudged the math. A lot. I aimed for a dramatic blend of facade, plausibility, and smoke and mirrors illusion so that if you don't look too closely, you can almost imagine it working. Like H.G. Wells' tale, Hollow World really isn't about time travel any more than reality television shows are documentaries. I hope you won't allow a little creative license to get in the way of enjoying the ride. I felt providing a good reading experience superseded an adherence to strict probability. Hollow World isn't a story about the science of time travel. So what is the story about? Listen on. A world awaits.
And now, Hollow World.
Chapter 1. Running Out of Time. When she said he was dying and explained how little time he had left, Ellis Rogers laughed. Not a normal response. The doctor knew it. Ellis did too. He wasn't crazy, at least he didn't think so, but how does anyone really know? He should have seen visions, flashes from his life, kissing Peggy at the altar, graduating college, or the death of their son, Isley. He should have fixated on all of the things that he'd never done, the words he had spoken or the ones he hadn't. Instead, Ellis focused on the four-letter word the doctor had said. Funny that she used that word. He never told her what was in his garage. The pulmonary specialist was a small Indian woman with bright, alert eyes and a clipboard that she frequently looked to for reference. She wore the familiar white lab coat, stethoscope stuffed deep in one pocket. She sat, or more accurately leaned against the front of her desk as she spoke. At the start of her speech, the doctor had begun with a determined, sympathetic resolve, but that train had been derailed by his inappropriate outburst, and neither of them seemed to know what to do next. "Are you all right?" she asked. "First test I ever failed," he said, trying to explain himself, hoping she'd swallow it and move on. Given the news she had just delivered, he deserved a little slack. The doctor stared at him concerned for a moment, then settled back into a professional tone. "You should probably get another opinion, Ellis." She used his first name as if they were old friends, though he'd only seen her the few times it had taken to get the tests performed. "Is someone working on a cure for this?" Ellis asked. The doctor sighed, keeping her lips firm. She folded her arms, then unfolded them and leaned forward. "Yes, but I honestly don't think anyone is close to a breakthrough." She looked at him with sad eyes. "You just don't have that much time." There was that word again. He didn't laugh, but he might have smiled. He needed a better poker face. Ellis shifted his sight away from her and instead focused on 3 jars sitting on a counter near the door. They looked like they belonged in a kitchen, except that these contained tongue depressors and cotton swabs instead of sugar and flour. He couldn't tell what was in the last one, something individually packaged, syringes maybe, which reminded him to double-check the first aid kit to make sure it had a good supply of aspirin. Not all of them did.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.